we'll turn that on. I appreciate that. And all right, so I was wondering how many people got a chance to go to the Pathway to Literacy website and look around there at their materials, look at lesson plans, and what you found, what you thought was interesting, what questions you have. I thought it would be good to hear from as many people who want to share. Who wants to go?
I thought it might be a bit intimidating in the detail that's provided. I selected the list view since I thought that might be the easiest way for someone who's new to sort of follow along. And then I noticed that it starts changing a color and repeating steps A, B, C, D without a lot of explanation for a neophyte. So I proceeded on through, but I thought, again, it's very valuable in terms of the detail, but the first look was a little bit overwhelming to me.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot there, right? And we'd have to pick one thing. I'm going to look into this thing and then delve deep to understand that. Yeah. Other comments? What did you find? Linda Gaudreau.
I really liked that they presented it in so many different ways. I looked at the Excel version, so to speak, by categories, and then I looked at it by list. And I thought, wow, it's just like being in a library and teaching somebody, do you like to look at the table of contents or do you like to read the index to get your information? So I really like that the information for teachers was at least organized that way. I wasn't quite clear from the lesson plans whether that part of it actually goes out to the participants of the classes, but I didn't think so. I thought it would just go to the teacher and the assistants. So I really appreciated that. Although I did notice they're pretty heavy, as I've seen in other areas in literacy. I'm new to it, pretty heavy on acronyms, and it would be nice if they defined how they were using that acronym earlier.
Yeah, that's a good point. With other people, what about the lesson plans or the lesson overviews? What did you look at? Ruth Ann, did you get a chance to look?
I looked ever so briefly for the first 5 minutes before I signed on. So I just did a little, it struck me as a lot of wonderful information, but I sure didn't even look close enough to see if I'd be overwhelmed by it. I just thought nice to have that resource and the lesson plans broken down.
Right, for when you need it, you'll know it's there, you'll know where to go. Yeah, Jenny.
I thought it was a lot of good information in one place. Because I'm new to this, I wasn't really sure about how to access where to begin, kind of like I've heard mentioned before. I am a big fan of videos because I tend to be cooking or doing something else. And if I can have a video on where somebody else is animating the content and presenting it, that is favorable for my learning style right now, because I'm trying to do a lot of different things. I didn't see enough of that on the link that I had. I would have been a bigger fan of more link through to instruction. I know the content's out there. It's simply a matter of hooking it to the lesson plan. But yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. It was interesting.
Good. Thanks for that, Jenny. Any other comments?
Well, I just skimmed it also barely, but it looked to me like a great resource and a great place to go where I could get some ideas of things to do in the lesson that I might not have thought of. It gave me some structure, gave me a reference point. I didn't get into it too deeply, but it looked wonderful and reassured me, when I hit areas where I don't know what to do next, that I could go to that and get some ideas, concrete ideas.
Sue?
I dived right in. I actually used some of the material with my learner today. And I appreciated the fact that it had lots of good visual material organized so it's easy to access. So you're not just all over the internet trying to find just the right video or or the visual or whatever, which can become just a rabbit hole. I agreed with your comment, Linda, that in the lesson plans, there's so much there. I mean, I just took one or two things that we drilled on, and that was perfectly adequate. But the lesson plans I found were very helpful because it, again, gave you ideas. It gave you variety. So I think it's a tremendous resource.
Great. It's a great point. And to the way we started off, Alex started off talking about, it's a little bit like can be a little bit like a fire hose. And I think it's a good metaphor overall for, teaching, especially beginners. There's so much they need to learn. Where do I start? And if you feel fire hosed when you go to this site, this is the lesson planning. I just clicked on lesson plan tools and I scrolled down. Some students have particular needs for particular kinds of information, but really you could start anywhere. Think what is going to be useful. And I would just, if the other stuff overwhelms you, I would not worry about it at all. I just say, okay, we're going to do a unit on health and we're going to work through, and maybe, like Sue says, we're not going to cover everything in here, everything in any of their lesson plans, because there's so much, but you can just go right here and start diving into this one. And within the lesson plan, as you get to know your learner better, you get a better sense for what's most relevant to them. But this is as good a place to any, as any to start. Personally, I love starting with food because it's just something so recognizable and makes students sort of often feel calm. Okay, I know, pictures or whatever. Everyone has to eat. All right. Any other questions or comments about that? Okay, so please interrupt me anytime again, okay? Last week, we started talking about pictures, and we talked about all different kinds of ways that you could use pictures and write text from pictures and reread and play disappearing words and all those kinds of things with pictures. So we're going to go through and talk about how you could use different kinds of materials. We know that we want to scaffold with our learners. We want to start with maybe with the yes/no questions, with the things that are the easiest, and then gradually get them to produce their own speech or their own writing. And we can use a variety of ways, and we want to use a variety of ways to do that. So we started talking about pictures, and now I want to talk about text. And when I say text, I mean anything from a story, a book, an article, anything it could have at the lower level, it's going to have pictures also. But if we want to start focusing in on text and we're trying to choose a book or a story or some kind of written material, what are some things that come to mind that you'd want to think about when you're deciding between two different sources or two different kinds of texts? Comes to mind?
Well, you have to decide what you're teaching. I mean, the text needs to mirror what you're teaching. In fact, you may have to just change whatever text you write anyway to fit what you're teaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of adaptation.
I think keeping your text simple, again, based on the objective, but you don't want to be introducing too many new words if you're trying to teach a concept. So again, it goes back to that objective. Is the objective to teach new terms, or is it to teach a system within the text?
And new vocabulary can quickly become overwhelming. And I remember reading research that said that it's much harder for a learner to learn many words that are of the same sort of category. So if you're working on colors and you're working on numbers, to learn the names of 10 colors, they're just random words, right? We assign them meaning by knowing that orange is something orange, this is blue. But to learn 10 colors at a time and keep them separate is harder than learning maybe 5 colors and 5 numbers in 1 week, because they can operate sort of in different spaces in the brain. And then also you can mix. Funny, I just started with an echo. You can mix the colors and numbers, and you can have 5 oranges and 3 green apples and 2. And so you start to, your learner can construct meaning using those 2 different sets of vocabularies. And we're only going up to 5, and we're only, learning the 5 colors, and we're going to use those in as many different combinations as we possibly can before we go on to learn even more. In my Russian, I still can't remember purple and brown, because I think I learned too many at once, and those just did not stick. Yeah, Linda.
I especially think of when you first started it, I wasn't even going to some of those ideas. I was thinking about text font, text size, because it's hard when you're reading another language, if you use something with serifs or without serifs, it makes a difference for the person to actually see what that letter is. And if they're really trying to learn it as a shape, to say that what looks like a circle but has got a line through it is really the letter E. If you've got a fancy font, that just gets in the way of their trying to make sense of what that looks like.
Absolutely.
So I think of sizes and styles of font in any of the things that I'm trying to put up on a PowerPoint.
Yeah, I got trained in that in one of the classes that I was teaching when COVID hit was a level 3 class, and one of the students had very, very bad visual impairment, and she trained me always to have my text big and bold, because that was the first class I ever taught online. And yeah, that's super important. I had some other ideas. Do you want the student to be able to read this text alone, or are you going to be reading it to them, at least in the beginning? Students can understand a lot more than they can read on their own. If they know, particularly we're talking about learners who are not literate in their first language, and they're just getting used to they're just getting used to written language. If they have some spoken vocabulary, and you can find or create a text that uses the words that they're already familiar with, they can start developing this spoken to written word recognition. Advanced students really ask me often about, what kinds of books should they read, and how difficult can they be. And if you're going to be studying a text, and you have your translate or your English book or whatever next to you, and you're going to be reading very slowly, that's a different kind. You can do something more difficult than if you want them to be able to read for enjoyment. And both are important. You never want to get too difficult, even in the studying, because the text loses its meaning if you have to look up every other word. But the concept of why are we doing this, going back to what we were saying earlier about objectives. If we want to model for writing, so maybe we're teaching our learners to write about themselves, write a story about their home or something. We want to choose a much easier text than if we're maybe developing the vocabulary, or we're going to read to them, because we really want them to understand the structure of a sentence. We don't talk about sentence structures to them, but we want the sentence structure to be repeatable, substitutable, right? You take out this character, whatever, Hannah loves fruit. You can change that to Linda loves bananas, or, so you want the text, if you're going to want them to appropriate that text, make it theirs and adapt it, you want it to be way simpler than if this is going to be an exercise in some of these other, objectives. Vocabulary development, not too much at once. Can't tell you how many times we look up the same word over and over again, learning language, right? And we just need this same vocabulary. All those things, if you have had kids or grandkids and you read the same stories over and over and over again, The ones that have a lot of repetition that are really annoying, those are really great for language learners. Whereas really like a book for a kindergartner has a huge vocabulary. So a lot of books that are good for a kindergartner would not be good for a language learner. But if you can go into the preschool books and find ones, there are more, we're going to see lots of examples. There are more and more texts written for adult, low-level adult English learners. But sometimes some of the children's books can be fun if they're not too annoying, but the repetition is good. Sometimes we teach about pronunciation and rhythm. And, you know, I used to think before I got into this seriously that Dr. Seuss would be great. But there's so many, Dr. Seuss uses so many made up words. Ruth Ann's nodding. And, you know, even this is left foot, right foot. Well, that's useful. But sick feet, trick feet, what does that mean? So even though Dr. Seuss has good rhythm, it often doesn't make sense. And we don't need to spend time explaining those things. More considerations. We talked about repetition and new vocabulary load. How much text is there per page, right? For lower level readers, we don't want so much. And like Linda brought up, the physical size and shape of the text is important too. So I wanted to show you several examples. This example, Nikki and Matt are classmates, comes from a book written by a colleague of ours named Tim Krause, who has gotten grants to create open educational resources. And I think I can make this bigger. This is one of the books that he wrote. It's called 10 Easy Picture Stories for Beginning Students of English. And it has classmates studying in the computer lab, buying food. There are a lot of standalone chapters, so to speak. So I'll show you, talking about the size and look of the page. This is the online book from Tim's, and this is my adaptation of it. So we talked about this a little bit last week. I do not hesitate to copy and paste into a document and make things as big as we need to make them. And then, so in this class, we read through this, pretty simple. People can tell, you know, what it's about. And then we got to the very end, and this is part of the book. They are talking, "Hi, how are you?" And my students just started finishing their conversation. So we recorded this. "I'm good, thanks. How are you?" "I'm okay." You know, we got that far. And then we went, okay, back up to the story. "What's her name?" "Her name is," so we're using questions and sentence structure. We're going back to demonstrate comprehension out of the story. Where do they go? They go to English class. These happen to be in Tim's book. I just took a screenshot and made it big. And so he has already in the book some ready-made examples, some ready-made exercises and activities. And then we created a story. I had copied and pasted the pictures beforehand without any text next to it. And then with the students, we started, and they didn't understand at first what I wanted them to do, but I wrote, "Her name is," and I just did this. And then they understood that I wanted them to fill that in. And "his name is," same thing. And these were the names that the students who were in that class. This was the spring of 2020. We were all learning how to do this online. And some of them really wanted these two to be boyfriend and girlfriend instead of just friends. They didn't have the language, but I heard. Someone knew the word married, and oh my goodness, there was so much going on in this story. So these were, and I didn't focus. We were a beginner class. I wasn't focused on present tense, but you know, one student knew these things, so I was going to record whatever they came up with. And, we went on from there. But it just shows you can take something simple, and if you can copy and paste it to a document, you have so much flexibility in what you can do with it, regardless of the original the original author's intent. This is another website, Bow Valley College, and all these are, I'll send to the presentation. All these links are in the presentation. I think I opened one, yes. And sorry, I'm going to share my sound. This is the Bow Valley books, which are available at different, that you can see they have different levels of books, level B, level C. They have audio, at least the lower level ones do. So you can work on this with your student and then show them how to get the audio, and they can listen and repeat when they're at home. So they don't need you to do all their learning.
Lynn buys food. Lynn buys food. Lynn buys cabbage. Lynn buys garlic.
So it has, several different kinds of food. And then at the end, I think she probably pays money. I can't remember exactly what she does with that. But it's great to give our students that kind of repetition. Let's see, here's another site. This comes from a site called Unite Us. And the books on this, it's Unite for Literacy, sorry, uniteforliteracy.com. They have a whole ton of books. They have books on professions. They have books on family and animals. They're really mostly designed for kids. All the pictures in the books are kids, whereas that other one, Bow Valley, those books are intended for adults. These are intended for children, but there are some gems in there. I've used this a number of times, this Hair Days class. It also has audio.
Some of us have long hair.
And you can see the different, because this physical characteristics is often something that we work on with students. And in addition, I have gone through this whole book, and then let's see, find this. Okay, this is using Zoom's annotate function. I just went into annotate and it created a box. And as it happens with this book, you think I have way too much time on my hands sometimes. That word gets covered up. And so after we've gone through the book or part of the book, we can go back and look at some pages and see if they remember the words. And that box happens to be in the right place. Not all books are so obliging, the people who lay them out. I can't imagine they thought of this as they were working on it. But this is another way to go back, and it's assessment, it's a game, it's a test, it's playing around, it's having fun with the material. Questions? All right. So
I had a quick question. Linda, you said you used a Zoom thing to do a block. Can you just describe how to find that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's do it. Let's practice it here. I'm going to share my screen. Now, at the top of your screen, you have a little bar, and one of the buttons says more options, I think, or view options. If you click on that and then click on annotate. And then you should be able to write on this screen, draw things, write text. Are you seeing that? There, someone's in circling. I can see who that was. Checking them off. Annotate stays on the screen. So if you move this screen around, the placement. So this is something that you could have students do also to get them to write on the screen. could be a mixed bag. If your student's on a phone or on a tablet, everything works a little bit differently with Zoom. And if technology, we don't want to make technology ever to be a barrier in our classes. But when you are the teacher, when you are the Zoom host, you don't even have to click on the view options. When you share your screen, there's a bar at the top that has your microphone and your video control and all that. And one of the options is annotate, and it gives you all the same functionality that you're seeing there. You can write. And when you're the host, you also have superpowers, which can go like that. So I've just deleted everybody's annotations.
Which annotation title creates the block? Is that the format?
It's draw. If you click on draw.
Oh, I see it. Thank you.
Yeah. The thing about annotate, what you have to remember is that when you're done annotating, you have to click that toolbar on the far left side has an arrow. It's called mouse. You have to click mouse again to get control of your mouse to be able to move your screen around. Otherwise, anytime you click, you're still going to be annotating. You're going to be drawing things. So that's the biggest thing that freaks people out. The first time they use annotate is, now I can't get out of here. And you just have to click on that mouse button. Not like I'm going to do right now. All right. Bye. The other thing to know about annotate is as soon as you stop sharing, it all goes away. So if you've been doing something with annotate and then you want to talk and then you want to go back, it's going to be gone. So just something to know. But often if you're projecting a book or something like this, not a document, it's a great way to type on the screen. Someone uses a word or you use a word, they're not sure what it is, and you want to spell it for them or have them spell it to you, and you can type it using annotate on the screen.
So that only annotates the screen. It doesn't annotate the document that is being shown on the screen.
Exactly, correct. Yeah. Okay. All right, so let's go back to this. All right, so different ways to use stories. When we look along the continuum that we talked about on last week, we can start with very supported uses, reading, repeating. First, we can ask them, look at the picture. What do they think the story might be about? And again, if you're a very low level learner and you're pretty sure they're not going to be able to say anything, we skip that part. But you never know. Students always surprise us. We can show a picture and say, what is that? And, see if they can come up with anything. Reading and repeating chorally is if I say, repeat. This is, her name is Nikki, and everyone would repeat together. That's called choral repetition, individually or independently. Sometimes the only way to get students to participate in class or to get the participation you want is to call on students individually. And, you want to be careful. You're asking something that they know, and we don't want to embarrass anybody. But there are a lot of cultures from which students will not participate unless they're asked a direct question. Or if you have a class where you have a dominant, higher level learner who's always going to pipe in, and they don't leave any airspace for other learners to pipe in, then sometimes you have to say, wait, wait, Jenny, Judy. And then they, eventually they get the message that that they need to wait and not always answer first. Reconstructing texts, reconstructing the story, and then eventually getting to where they can tell their own story, like I started to do in the Nikki and Matt example, where we did our own story, but it was still very supported because we were coming up with sentences specifically about each picture. It wasn't just open, stop sharing and totally open saying, okay, we're going to make a story about two people. That would have been way too hard for this group. but they had just read a story with these specific steps, and now we can do the same, guided by the same pictures. And didn't seem to bother them that we were calling the same woman by a different name. Okay, so here are some of the ones that we just looked at. Home and School is Tim's, and several others. African Stories is another one that has audio. It has some very good stories. Minnesota Literacy has whole banks of stories that you can download. They're really good as well. Questions? Okay. So videos.
I have a
yeah,
question.
Linda.
So have you ever used the read aloud options in Overdrive from either Multnomah County Library or other county libraries, where they can follow along what's being read aloud because the word highlights as they hear it? Have you ever done that?
I explored that a while ago, but I've forgotten about that. I have not used that. Have you?
I have when I've been in the library trying to teach people some things, just as an option when they've had usually children, but we did do it with a Vietnamese family that was willing to start with children's books. There are very few that are really adult content that are like that. But if they do have the ability to get online and have access to that, or if you wanted to try it, you could go into Overdrive and search for read aloud.
Cool, that's great. Jenny?
Isn't it on the read aloud that's on computers as well, that you can read documents and you can also control for speed? Yeah, I think it's great. As a former speech and debate coach, I would listen to things sometimes just to see how it would sound and the cadence just on an electronic reading. And even me as an English speaker listening to it, that was a tool that I use weekly. I love those. And Overdrive is fantastic.
That's great. Good resource. Thank you. I spent a lot of time in speech and debate land. I had a high school debater, my son. So yeah, familiar with some of their drills. He still listens to podcasts at double speed. Okay, so let's talk about videos now. There are, in my mind, videos as a rule overall fall into two categories. There are videos with words and videos without words. And if your goal has to do with listening and oral speech, then clearly you want to use a video with words. But if your goal is just about anything else, I recommend using videos without words. And this is one example, but if you search for, it's going to let me, yes, here, sorry. Search for wordless video shorts. Hello. Video shorts. There are a ton of new animation videos that are, they just have music, and because as soon as if there are subtitles, it's a reading exercise. If there are words, spoken words, it's a listening exercise. But maybe we want to work on vocabulary, or we want students just to be able to tell a story, or we want to use it as a conversation generator. And I'll give you an example, I think, of what I mean. This is one of my favorites. Here we go. So she's yakking, but the object, we don't have to care. We don't care what she's thinking, what she's saying. Okay, I'm not going to tell you what's in the box. and this actually has more talking than the others that I usually use, but you can see it's not, the objective isn't to hear her chatter. It's just sort of the wah, wah, wah in the background. And it's very sweet. I have to say, I've watched this video many, many times and I always cry at the end. All right. So what might I do with that kind of video? Here, I have taken screenshots, and one more, you'll see what's in the box. It turns out this dog has 3 legs, and at the very end, I won't tell you what happens. But here again is a platform for using vocabulary. We can do, what is he doing? He is playing. He is watching. Or emotion words, right? Whatever it is, you can be telling a story, and often telling a story, just having students practice expressing anything, right, is really good. We don't always have to care that it's grammatically correct. Whatever the story can produce, it's another way of sort of mixing it up. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, so we saw trying on clothes, that video last week. We looked at it. I wanted to look at, okay, what might we do with that kind of video? So it's going to be part of a unit about shopping or about clothes. And first we'll talk about clothing names, and I might do a game. This is using a platform called WordWall, but there are others also. And this is very simple. He's wearing a t-shirt, and you have to choose which one is a t-shirt. And so that's all this has. It has 12 different ones, and some of them are repeat, but just another way of going over the vocabulary. So we're doing vocabulary. We're going to watch the video. As we watch the video, we're going to, probably it's 3 minutes or something. We'll watch the whole thing, and then we'll come back to the beginning, and we'll watch it in small snippets and have students repeat, listen and repeat, listen and repeat, listen and repeat. And then maybe we'll take the dialogue and have, if you have more than one student, they can practice, they can do the dialogue together and then switch. If you're teaching one-on-one, you can do one side, the other student can do one side. And if you have many students in your class or in your breakout room with you, it may seem like, oh, well, only 2 students are getting to rehearse the dialogue at once, and for everyone else is sitting bored. Not at all. Everyone else is practicing in their head, while the ones who are doing it out loud are doing it out loud, and they're practicing for their turn. Then this was for the second part. Now, the other thing I did with this, I don't know if you're familiar with Flippity. This is in Flippity, and Flippity, it's a free web-based service that has templates to let you do all kinds of fun things. And this is one where I plugged in all of the lines from the dialogue, and the students had to reconstruct the dialogue. And we could say, they got, excuse me, that started. And then it was, yes, can I help you? And so we literally and the first one of these, they were sort of having a little bit of trouble. I did this with my class this year, figuring out exactly what I wanted. But as soon as we got the first 2 up, then they were moving, because we had already repeated we had watched the video, we had repeated after the video, we had practiced the dialogue. Those are progressively coming down the continuum, starting with very supported. This is a little bit less supported. It's still very supported. You're not constructing it from ground zero. And then we can, once we get these in order, we can practice it again.
So Linda, on that, do you have to be the one to do the moving, or is there a way to give that to a student?
No, on this, you have to, the host, the teacher has to do the moving. So if I were in a class, I would have these and have done this cut up on little pieces of paper, and I would have made several sets for them to work in pairs to do it. So you don't get that. But in a certain way also, it can be freeing too, because they can free up, they can concentrate just on what you're doing on the screen. And then you can send this to them. If I sent you this link, you would have your own Tableau to mess around with. It wouldn't impact mine. Questions? It's very quiet. We've done that. All right. Oh, and then flashcards I also made with Flippity. Here, see if we can make these bigger. No. In that video, in the trying on clothes, the pants are too short, the jacket's too tight. So I really wanted them to get a handle on this too. And the pants are too long. Whoops, where is there we go. Jacket's too small. So this is something else. This is flashcards you can send home with them, right? And one of the things I love about the Flippity flashcards is there are different ways to study them. So here you have a list of all of the pictures and the phrases. This one's a matching. So you can say the pants are too short. Click those and they can do it on their phones or wherever. This is the hardest practice because you have to write the pants are too short. And if you get a period wrong, it's marked wrong. So, but again, it goes in progressive order of difficulty. Questions? Can you see yourself using some of these tools and techniques with the students that you're working with? Yeah, Ruth Ann.
Well, it's a lot of information. And just as an assistant in a class, I don't know about using them, but do you have a favorite one you always go to, or because you know all the different nuances of these different websites and apps, you know how to cherry pick? Because to me, it's a lot of information. And
It is. I'm trying to find a balance between giving, because everyone has different needs. So if you can pick out one or two things that look like they would work and just forget the others, sort of like looking at that Pathways for Literacy site. They have so many different things. And I would say, okay, just decide you're going to do food and you're just going to focus narrowing on that. For me, there are so many videos out there. There aren't, I have to say, in the video realm, there aren't an unlimited number of ones that I would use. There are more and more things being created, good things being created for adult learners, but still not unlimited. Most of what you find out there is for kids. And a lot of the kids in the video realm, a lot of things for kids are really silly beyond, or annoying beyond my level of tolerance. But for example, the shopping with clothes, I have used that so many times. It's a go-to video for me. You've used it too, Judy.
I used it last week because I think you had it in something. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah, Jenny.
Will you have on this a list of the resources you use and whether or not they require a paid subscription? Okay.
Yes.
Because I came away from this and I do volunteering for an excellent ESL teacher. She teaches me Portuguese and I help with some classes she does. And I just adore her. And she seems like tops. And then all of a sudden I saw something in your class where there were just a few technology things that seemed slightly different, that maybe are individually driven in how you use a technology. But how did you become so expert in these technologies in mastering Zoom? Because you seem to act as if you're literally having access to everything. Do you have two screens there, or how does this work from your end?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm a little bit, maybe my friend who's sitting over there would say a lot of a nerd when it comes to some of this. So I enjoy, researching and, finding some of the loopholes. I'll tell you that of everything that I have shown you last week and today, the only thing that requires payment is the word wall, those games. Everything else, the videos, the books, the games, the Flippity, everything else is free.
Okay.
Word wall was the one thing I really like it, and it helps save me a lot of time in classes just because it's easy to create games. So I decided that was one thing that I was going to treat myself to last year. And now Beaverton Literacy has some subscriptions. From a setup standpoint, yeah, I teach with 2 screens because when I'm sharing and typing on my document, when students are talking or whatever, I want to be able to see the document and I want to be able to see all the faces. Because I tend to teach classes, so I'll have anywhere from 5 to 12 or maybe 13 students. And I have a second screen at home. Now I am not home. And I'll tell you, I bought a little toy that I'm just over the moon about. I have to see, I might have to send you pictures because right now my screens are, yeah. So this is my second screen. It folds just like a tablet. It weighs less than a pound. It comes with this case and with a stand like this. And my laptop is 6 years old. I have a 6-year-old MacBook Air, and I was able to get an adapter that it cost $169 on Amazon. I tried to find it locally, but I only thought of it 3 days before I was leaving on this trip. Yeah.
What is the brand? And it's called the folding screen, or what's the name of the?
It was a brand that I had never heard of before, which is probably maybe why it was so cheap. Not that I'm expert in brands. I think it's called Cocoa Par. I can send you the details of it. It's lightweight, it's small. They have them in different sizes, but the way I found it, I searched for portable monitors. And most of them were more expensive. This one was less. I thought, well, this might be an example of you get what you pay for, but so far it's working great. And it allows me to, I put your faces on my laptop because that's where my camera is. And otherwise you would always be looking at the side of my head. And I put whatever I'm sharing, my documents on that side screen.
Okay, well, if you ever teach a class on how to do all that, I would like to be signed up because it's impressive. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad. Thank you. Yeah. If you're going to do if you're teaching one-on-one or 2 or 3 students, when you share your screen on Zoom, and I've used Teams just to dial into other people's meetings, so I'm not very familiar with Teams. I know that there are other tools out there also, WebEx and others. I'm most familiar with Zoom. So I know if you're teaching just a few students, or if you're an assistant in a class and you're not going to have more than 4 or 5 students in your breakout room at a time, you can see your shared screen and you can see the students along the side or along the top. And that's all you need. You just want to be able to see their faces. But if you're teaching more at a time, and my vision really isn't that great today, I'm wearing my glasses today because my eyes are itchy, but I need things to be bigger. So
in order to share the screen with your data on Zoom, I'm sorry, I'm so ignorant about this, but is there like a thing on there that says share screen?
yeah,
or bring up I don't know how you do that.
just in general, how to share a screen.
I don't know how you get the data up there, like you're showing a program and you also have the pictures of the people on it at the same time.
You would have, before class starts, I open everything that I need to have open. And for this class, because this workshop, because I want to demonstrate different things, I have a lot of different tabs. You saw I was going from one tab on my browser to the next to the next. When I'm normally teaching, I don't have all that stuff open. I have my one document with all the class notes that I keep. It's like my whiteboard, where anything that I would normally write on a whiteboard, I will type on that document. And at the end of class, I can send the link to that document from the document to the students. So I'll have that open. And if I'm going to be looking at a website with them, maybe an online book, I'll have that open. And usually it's just, 2 or 3 things.
Let's see.
And I have my lesson plan. I'm old school with my lesson plan. I do my lesson plans. I type them because I share them with my assistants and with other people. But before each class, because I can't manage, excuse me, I can't manage 3 different screens, and having too much going on the screens is just a recipe for disaster for me. So before each class, I write out the key points of my lesson plan, and I always have a notebook next to me. And that also keeps it fresh, because sometimes I'll do my lesson plan several days in advance, believe it or not. And if I write it out, in the half an hour before class, then I'll remember, more likely to remember what I'm doing or what I wanted to do. So I have my lesson plan written out. I have open documents on just 2 or 3 things that are open. And then in Zoom, when you click the share screen button, it will give you the options on what do you want to share out of the things that are open on your computer.
Oh, okay.
So
Great, thank you.
yeah. And with my 2 screens, it doesn't recognize that share screen button, gives me the options that's over here, or, just whatever I have open.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry if that was way more explanation than you wanted, but
No, it wasn't. It's just what I needed. Thank you.
okay, good. Other questions? Okay. So let's see. Linda, I have a Zoom handout in PDF about, great. Okay, thank you, Linda. That would be great. Linda has something to share with us about Zoom formats and things. Okay. So we talked about videos. Now I just wanted to go through things that we have at home, things that are sort of part realia. What realia is just a word that means things from the real world. So I can't remember, we talked last week about calendars. What kinds of things can you learn, can you teach from a calendar? Ideas.
Numbers, days of the week.
Holidays.
Ordinals.
Ordinal numbers, that race thing we talked about last time. Tomorrow, yesterday, today, next week, next month, into, and then more advanced. Here's some of the ones I have written out that I was able to think about. When questions, past tense, future tense. So many things are based around the calendar. Life events. I have many times hummed the birthday song or sang it to get people to understand when is your birthday, and almost every student has understood once I start saying happy birthday to you. They're like, oh, okay, we know what she's talking about. So many weather forecasts, we'll talk about that even by itself, but that's right. Any kind of forecast has days in it. Here's a forecast. So numbers, what else from a forecast?
Rain.
Or Oregon's 6 words for 20 different kinds of words for rain. So these are things that can go together, right? You can use as part of it if you're teaching numbers and you're teaching days of the week, and you've spent a lot of time with the calendar. This is another way to talk about days of the week. And our students are not always going to see Wednesday written out completely, right? Sometimes they'll see the abbreviation, and it's important for them to be able to identify that. Even if you get a reminder for a doctor appointment, it might just say TUE instead of Tuesday, right? The date.
Is that common in other languages to shorten days of the week like that? Is that something that needs defining for them?
I would, yes. Just make sure they understand that. I spent a month in Brazil a few years ago, and I had my phone language set to Portuguese, actually until very recently. And my phone calendar, they were abbreviating the Portuguese days of the week, and actually in Portuguese, the days of the week are first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and the first is Sunday. They don't have other words for their days of the week.
Wow.
Right. This is, weather forecast. Don't forget Celsius and Fahrenheit. These numbers. And usually, especially at the beginner level, I won't even deal with Celsius and Fahrenheit. I forgot about this when I took this screenshot, but I would put Celsius degrees up here. There's so many things that a student is learning off this. They don't also need to learn Celsius to Fahrenheit conversions on this one. So if they saw these temperatures, they'd probably go hide somewhere. Would be dead in that Celsius. So weather forecasts, a lot of the same things that you have for calendars. So they often can go really well together. Sunrise, sunset. Map directions. So those cardinal directions, northeast, southeast, those you have in wind, but in the Portland metro area, they also can help you know where a street is, right? If you get a street address that has northwest in it. Once I had a friend who grew up in Seattle, and when I mentioned that once, she said, wow, I thought every city was like that. I had never, before coming to Portland more than 30 years ago, had never seen that. I'm from the East Coast, from the Northeast, so. But that can help students. Okay. Grocery store flyers. What can we be teaching from grocery store flyers?
Sales, prices.
Comparisons.
Yeah, comparisons.
Vocabulary, color, decimal points.
Right, so there's a lot, this falls into that category of, there are a lot of things that our students are not going to understand. They need to be able to pick out the things that they do understand, right? We can curate in class, but out in the real world, the things that they have exposure to are not curated, and there's going to be a lot that they can't understand, and they need to be able to approach those pieces of information, those inputs, without getting intimidated or freaking out or distracted, or right, with calmness. They need to be able to pick out something where maybe they're not going to understand 80%, but they can look at it and figure out what can they understand. So numbers again, how do we say numbers? $1.99, $1.99, all the sale language, 50% off and all that, that's fairly advanced. We don't always need that, but they can read what this is. They can learn what this is, 3 for $5. And even basic things like someone said colors, right? Very colorful. So they need to be able to look at something where they don't understand everything and just feel at peace with that and identify what they can understand. Cheap and expensive. Small talk about food. Recipes are often a good way to go. Just 3 little words, 2 little words even. I want, I like, I want, I like, I want, I like, I need, right? And we can use the same, recycle the same ends of the sentences over and over and over and over again with those 3, a good deal or a bad deal. I had an advanced student come into class one day, so excited. She said, I discovered. What did you discover? BOGO. I discovered BOGO. Buy one, get one. That was like the biggest revelation to her. Cashiers, receipts, comparative. Other food thing. A big revelation that in the word aisle, the letter S is silent. And so is, depending how you look at it, the A and the E. But another good way, okay, you don't know what all these are, but do you know any of them? Can you recognize any of them? We have students who may have food sensitivities, or someone in their family has food sensitivities or allergies. They don't have, or they need low sodium or something. They don't need to be able to understand everything on a food label. Heaven knows I can't. But we can teach them to look for salt or sodium and, what's a lot and what's a little. Look at 2 different labels and see, what's high and what's low. Bus schedules. Something else when we're teaching about time and how do you say times. Can you ask a bus driver where they're going or something? Anyway, looking at the schedules, there are a lot of things to learn, and days of the week are in here as well. Questions?
I
So
have
there's
a
a
question. How did you
Yeah.
get the pictures into your presentation?
I took screenshots.
How do you do that?
So do you have a Mac or a PC?
Mac.
Let's see if I get these keys right. Yes, okay. On your Mac, how many people here are on Macs? Yes, several. Okay, on your Mac, if you hold down at the same time the Shift key, the Command key, and the number
4.
well, it depends what you want to do. The number with the number 3, that will give you, and so hold Shift and Command and then click 3, and it will give you a screenshot of your whole screen. You see it come there. And then it's just a JPEG. It's just a picture on your hard disk. And in the same way you would put any picture into a document, you would do that one. If you hold the Shift and Command and the 4 key down, you'll see a little crosshairs, and you can use that to click, hold, and drag to get a screenshot of only a certain part of your screen. And I'm sorry, I don't know how off the top of my head to do it on a PC. I was hoping you were going to say Mac. Other questions?
I was wondering about assessment in terms of, we described students in the aggregate, the class. How important is that? There was a suggestion in the overview about using badges to sort of track accomplishments. Is that very helpful to students if they ask, how am I doing? Some sort of metric to gauge progress, report back to a supervisor about.
Right, sometimes if they're doing it for work. In my absent some external need for assessment grades or whatever, in my view, there are 2 kinds of assessment that are really important. One is, it's called formative assessment. And that is the ongoing, as student is learning, you're constantly, as a teacher, you're constantly assessing, you're constantly saying, okay, we did this activity. Could you do it? Did you get it? If not, I'm going to go back and do something easier, you know, up the continuum. If you were able to get it, then I'm going to go to the next one. I would never have a lesson plan and just mechanically work through the lesson plan, regardless of how students are responding to that, right? So that's you're already doing that naturally, constantly assessing your students to see whether you're on the mark with your lesson plan, if they are, you know, following or they're not following, and how we need to adjust and adapt. The other kind of assessment is called summative assessment, and that is, what have I learned between, you know, what the start of whatever September and December. I'm going to look at the sum total of what I've learned. And the tricky thing about summative assessment is that learning is uneven. I may be able to demonstrate some knowledge of something today, but tomorrow I'm going to, just because our learning is uneven, or maybe tomorrow we're focused on adjectives and I'm going to get the verb wrong, where you thought, wow, I really had the verbs down. But when you take those verbs and put them in a new context, it's going to be more difficult. And students have holes in different places. Some things are harder to learn for one person and easier to learn for someone else. And so to pick one point in time and to say, this is where you are, if you don't have to do it for a grade, I try to avoid that, because learning does do this. What you can do, though, is when you start, you have either something the student has written or tried to write, or you have notes from your first lessons, and you can talk to the student after X number of a month or 10 lessons or whatever you decide it to be. Remember where you were at the beginning. And you can actually go back, if it's a beginner student, even after several months. You can't have a sophisticated conversation about this, right? But you can bring up an image maybe that you showed on the first day, and maybe use that as a prompt and get them to dictate something to you about that image, and then show them what they did on the first day compared to what they could do now. So it's really, and I do think that's important, because every learner feels discouraged at some point, right? And that can help them see how far they've come. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Other questions? Okay. There's one other technique that I want to share. You may be familiar with it. It's called language experience approach. And language experience approach is about taking a narrative that the student knows, that the student can create or co-create with other students or with you. And so that the student can have ownership of that narrative. And sometimes for a beginner student, that could be extremely simple. Are you seeing the language experience approach on your screen? Okay. So it can be very simple, like choosing, the basis of it is to choose a familiar story or picture. We want this to be something that's going to be easy for them to describe, because we want to record their language. It can be a picture, it can be a video, with or without, probably better without words. It can be an experience. I have a colleague who was teaching beginners in person pre-pandemic, and she brought in juice and cookies to every class, and they created an LEA story, language experience story, around what happened first with a routine in class. Here's a super simple one. 3 pictures. Wake up, have breakfast, take the bus. For a big, a lower level student, it might look like this. And that's fine. If this is what they said, this is what I would record. The whole idea is, if it's their language, they will be able to read it, they will be able to repeat it, they will be able to talk about it. Whereas if I insist on coming out with this, and they don't know these words or they don't know these structures, then it's my story, it's not their story. So I tend not to, there's some debate, some teachers will record even really incorrect, patently incorrect grammar, and others will say, you make little corrections. I tend to be somewhere in the middle. So if they said, my student said wake, I would probably add the up, but I wouldn't make a sentence like this if this is what they're able to say. And then I would have them repeat it. And then we would probably play disappearing words and see what they could repeat. And then eventually they would be able to talk about their morning routine, or just the very simple part of their morning routine on their own, unaided. So again, the steps are to choose a familiar story, have students work collaboratively. If you just have one student, as much as they can. The teacher writes the sentences, so this is not a spelling exercise, excuse me, and it's not a writing exercise. It's a cognitive exercise to develop words to describe something. And so we don't want to make the cognitive load overly arduous by making them do all the work. They're doing a lot of work just to form the sentences and have them come out. And then, reading the story back, playing games with the words and the stories. And you're seeing a lot of repetition now in my techniques, right? A lot of similar things, whether it's a picture that we start with or a text that we start with, lots of repetition and recycling the content as much as we possibly can. Any questions? Okay, there's one thought that I want to leave you with, two thoughts, sorry. One is this grid. And again, it's about cognitive load. If you do you're bottom down here in the purple box, a known activity with known content, that could be fun. It could be a good way to review. It could be, a fun ending of class or something for the holiday, but there's not a lot of new learning in there. If you have a new activity, something that you've never done with the students before, I would do it with known content. So I wouldn't introduce new vocabulary in a new exercise. So if you're using flashcards for the first time with them, use flashcards with words that they know. And then they can get used to the flashcards. And then you'll have a known activity. You'll have those flashcards and you can put new content, new vocabulary in them. You just want to try to avoid being down in this box where everything is new. Questions? Does that make sense? All right, the last thought. This is the one. Another organization, another resource, ignore it if you'd like, but if you are working with students who are not literate in their first language, LESLA is a nonprofit organization that LESLA stands for Literacy Education and Second Language Learning for Adults, but it's this phrase, literacy education, is specifically targeted to students who are not literate in their first language. Because there are a lot of differences. And I think, yeah, I have pulled it up. It's a website with lots of resources, and also it's a place to do research. Maybe if you want more information about the place that your student is coming from. They have conferences as well. Questions, comments, ideas?
I have a question. Where did you get your pictures for the Flippity flashcards? Like the shoes are too big?
I Googled too big and I looked at the images and I just picked one. And I'd like to say.
With the screen capture? Screenshot capture?
that sometimes I'll do screen capture, but often, let's see. So here, let's see what I get. So I searched for too big, and I'm going to look at images. And here we can use this guy's pants. And you could do screen capture or do a right click and save image, or with Flippity, actually, they want the image link. So you can copy the image link. So this is just right click with your mouse or control click on your tap pad. What are those things called? And you can get it this way. Other questions? All right, I will send out, I'll probably do it tomorrow or maybe Wednesday. Yeah, probably Wednesday, just to under commit and maybe over deliver. I will send out a copy of the presentation and the video of this session, as well as Linda's document about Zoom options, and maybe a reminder about the overdrive. That was another one that sounded really good. And yeah, let me know. Feel free to get in touch anytime if you have questions or want to just chat about something related or not. All right.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You-
Thank you, Linda. That was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
Great.
Take care.
Thank you.